8,000 clay soldiers stand guard, and no two faces are the same. This is the Terracotta Army of China's first emperor, a discovery that rewrote history and presents us with an ancient puzzle on a monumental scale. By the end of this journey, you will understand the profound secrets behind these unique faces and what they tell us about an empire's power, artistry, and quest for eternity. How did artisans over 2,000 years ago create such staggering individuality? And were these warriors modeled on real people? Each silent figure holds a clue in its expression, waiting for us to listen. What does it mean to leave a legacy that lasts for millennia? The quiet fields of Lintong County held a secret for more than 2,000 years. In March of 1974, a group of local farmers were simply trying to solve a practical problem, digging a well to secure water for their crops. Their shovels struck something hard, something unexpected. As they cleared the earth, they uncovered not stone or root, but the sculpted head of a life-sized soldier made of fired clay. In that moment, a routine chore became a window into another world. The initial shock gave way to a dawning realization as archaeologists arrived, and the scale of the find became terrifyingly clear. This was not a single statue, but a corner of something vast, the edge of an entire buried army. What those farmers had found was the outermost guard of the mausoleum complex of Qin Shi Huang, the man who first unified China under a single imperial rule. Systematic excavation revealed 3 enormous pits laid out in a strategic formation. Pit 1, the largest, is a staggering tableau of more than 6,000 infantry soldiers and chariots, arranged in battle-ready columns. Pit 2 contains a mixed force of cavalry, archers, and charioteers, a more complex military unit. Pit 3 is believed to be the command post, with high-ranking officers overseeing the silent ranks. The global fascination was instant and profound. Here was an artistic and historical achievement of such magnitude it was quickly dubbed the 8th wonder of the ancient world. The sheer scale of the discovery prompts a haunting question. How could a project of this size, involving thousands of laborers and artisans, simply vanish from the landscape and memory for centuries? Historical records mentioned the emperor's grand tomb, but the specifics of this clay legion were lost, buried not just by soil but by time itself. Its re-emergence reminds us that history is not always found in libraries, but sometimes at the end of a farmer's shovel, waiting to rewrite everything we thought we knew. And as the dust settled on those first breathtaking excavations, an even more intimate mystery came into focus. Looking across the sea of silent faces, archaeologists made a stunning observation. No 2 soldiers looked exactly alike. The ambition behind this silent legion is almost beyond modern comprehension. Think of the largest sports stadium you can, packed with tens of thousands of people. Now imagine if every single face in that immense crowd was not a living person, but a unique, handcrafted sculpture of baked clay. That visual begins to approach the staggering scale of what was accomplished here. With an estimated 8,000 warriors, charioteers, and horses, the sheer volume is astonishing. But the true mystery is not in the number, it is in the breathtaking detail within that number. Early archaeological studies, carefully comparing and cataloging each unearthed figure, arrived at a conclusion that defies belief. No 2 faces are the same. This goes far beyond simple variations in uniform or hairstyle, which are themselves meticulously rendered to denote rank and military role. Look closer, and the individuality becomes personal. The arch of an eyebrow, some finely drawn and delicate, others thick and stern. The set of a mouth from a subtle, knowing half-smile to thin, pressed lips of grim determination. The unique contours of cheekbones, the shape of ears, the lines suggesting age or youth etched around eyes, these are not generic soldiers stamped from a mold. Each possesses a distinct expression, a posture, a presence that suggests a living identity. This level of intentional variation forces us to ask a monumental question. Were these silent guards modeled on real, individual people from the emperor's actual army? The logistical implications of such a task are dizzying. Consider the workshop that would be required. Not a single assembly line, but what must have been a sprawling artistic colony, a factory of individuality. Teams of master sculptors and countless apprentices, working for years, perhaps decades, to not only produce thousands of figures, but to ensure each one carried its own silent story in its features. The coordination, the planning, the sheer creative energy required is a testament to an almost unimaginable concentration of imperial will. This leads us to the profound statement being made. In unifying China, Qin Shi Huang commanded the land, the laws, and the people. With his Terracotta Army, he performed an even greater act of authority. He commanded individuality itself, capturing the essence of a vast, diverse human force and freezing it in clay for eternity. He did not want a faceless, anonymous horde guarding his rest. He demanded a legion of individuals, each with a face, to stand watch forever. But this act of immortalizing individuality creates a haunting shadow. If these faces were portraits of the living, what was the fate of the men they were based on? This question leads us to the darker edges of the emperor's legacy and a long-held, unsettling belief about the army's creation. The silence of these warriors is a lie. To understand them, you must hear the noise of their creation, the clamor of the world's most ambitious pottery workshop. This was not a single studio but a sprawling industrial complex, a state-run factory dedicated solely to the emperor's eternity. Forensic archaeology has peeled back the layers of clay to reveal their ingenious assembly. The massive, sturdy torsos and legs were not sculpted from scratch. Artisans used reusable sectional molds, pressing slabs of local lowest clay into forms to create standardized components. This assembly line approach solved the problem of scale, allowing for the rapid production of thousands of uniform body frames. But then, at a critical point on the production floor, the process transformed. Once the basic body was assembled and leather hard, the true artistry began. The heads and hands were crafted individually by hand. Skilled sculptors would take lumps of clay and build up the facial features, tooling the subtle nuances of expression, ethnicity, and age directly onto each warrior. They would then attach the head and hands to the waiting torso, seamlessly blending the joins. The result is a perfect marriage of industrial efficiency and profound personalization. Each soldier is a hybrid, born from both a mold and a master's touch. Evidence of this vast bureaucracy is stamped into the clay itself. Archaeologists have found small seal imprints and incised inscriptions on hidden parts of the figures. These are not signatures but accountability marks. They name foremen, workshop supervisors, and even individual craftsmen. One inscription might read, "Made by Gong from the workshop of Bei." This was a system of quality control and imperial oversight, where every component could be traced back to its maker. If a figure cracked in the kiln, someone was responsible. But the final, most perilous step was the firing. Imagine constructing a life-sized clay figure, hollow and weighing hundreds of pounds, and then baking it evenly in a wood-fired kiln. The potential for disaster was enormous. Uneven heating would cause catastrophic cracks, shattering months of work in an instant. Materials scientists studying the figures believe the artisans built colossal, trench-like kilns right near the mausoleum site. They likely fired the figures upright, in a slow, controlled burn over many days, using the specific local clay which had ideal plasticity and thermal properties. The miracle is that they achieved this not just once, but thousands of times with a remarkably low failure rate. This is the core of the second mystery. How did this system, designed for consistency and accountable mass production, simultaneously become a cradle for such wild, breathtaking diversity? The answer may lie in a simple human directive. The master sculptors, perhaps drawing from a vast reservoir of lived experience, were likely told one crucial thing: do not repeat a face. In that space between the mold-made body and the kiln's fire, within the rules of imperial production, the human hand was given a license to remember, to observe, and to create a world of individuals from memory and imagination. Yet, for all we understand about their creation, a shadow hangs over the creators themselves. What became of the artisans who held this secret knowledge, who gave form to the emperor's dream of an immortal army? Their fate is tied to the darkest legend surrounding the entire tomb. But that very silence speaks volumes. Gazing across the ranks, a question becomes impossible to ignore. Are we looking at a spiritual army or a startlingly literal one? Could each of these 8,000 unique faces be the portrait of a real soldier who served the first emperor? This theory transforms the entire site from a symbolic monument into something far more intimate, a potential military census frozen in clay. The evidence for this idea is etched into the very anatomy of the figures. Look beyond the faces to the bodies themselves. The warriors display a remarkable range of physiques. Some are lean and wiry, with the taut muscles of a long-distance runner or an archer. Others are broad and powerfully built, with thick necks and sturdy shoulders suited for bearing heavy armor or wielding long halberds. Their postures are not stiff and ceremonial, but dynamic and realistic. You see the subtle twist in the torso of a kneeling archer as he prepares to fire, the balanced stance of an infantryman ready to advance or defend. This is not idealized generic sculpture. This feels observational, as if the artists were capturing the way real soldiers actually stood, moved, and carried their weight. The detail extends to their equipment, which is a precise, three-dimensional record of Qin Dynasty military logistics. The armor plates on a general are meticulously rendered, with smaller, overlapping scales that denote flexibility and high status. The armor of a foot soldier is simpler, with larger, more robust plates. The stitching on leather tunics, the lacing on boots, the specific types of knots used to secure armor, all are depicted with an almost obsessive accuracy. This level of detail suggests the sculptors had direct, prolonged access to the army's gear and its wearers. Historians debate the feasibility of such a project. With a real standing army numbering in the hundreds of thousands, could conscripts have been pulled from duty to sit, one by one, for a clay portrait? The logistical disruption seems immense. A more likely scenario is that the master sculptors were embedded observers. They may have walked the barracks and training grounds, sketching and memorizing a vast gallery of human features, expressions, and body types. They drew from a deep reservoir of lived experience, compiling a mental library of the faces of an empire. The young recruit from the southern farmlands, the veteran officer with scars and a stern gaze, the cavalryman from the northern steppes with distinctive ethnic features. In this view, the army is not a collection of individual portraits, but a composite portrait of the entire military itself. It is hyper-realism on a collective scale. This interpretation raises a profound question about identity and immortality. If these figures are echoes of real men, then Qin Shi Huang accomplished something astonishing. He captured not just the idea of his power, but the very human substance of it. He granted a form of eternal service to his soldiers, not by preserving their bodies, but by immortalizing their likenesses in a permanent, unyielding medium. Their earthly duties ended long ago, but their clay counterparts stand guard forever. This transforms the pits from a tomb complex into a gallery of individual human legacies. each one a silent testament to a life lived in service to a colossal idea. Yet, this act of preservation through art stands in stark contrast to the historical whispers about the emperor's own final resting place. For while his army was immortalized in meticulous detail, his tomb chamber remained sealed, shrouded in legends far more dramatic and perilous than clay. The workshop floor was a symphony of organized chaos. To visualize the system, think of a modern car factory, but one where every vehicle rolling off the line ends up with a completely unique driver behind the wheel. The creation of the Terracotta Army relied on a brilliant hybrid method, a marriage of mass production and meticulous handcraft that solved an impossible equation. How do you make 8,000 of anything while ensuring no two are ever the same? The answer lay in modular assembly. The foundational bodies of the warriors were not sculpted from solid blocks of clay. Instead, artisans used a library of reusable molds. Thick slabs of the local, rich loess clay were pressed into these molds to create standardized components. Sturdy, hollow legs, a barrel-shaped torso, thick, powerful arms, these prefabricated parts were then carefully joined together, the seams smoothed and blended while the clay was still soft. This assembly line approach provided the crucial efficiency needed for a project of such staggering scale. It gave every warrior a consistent, robust internal framework. But a framework is not a person. This is where the production line transformed into an artist's studio. Once the basic body was assembled, it was moved to a different station, a place of quiet focus amidst the industrial hum. Here, the true magic of individuality began. The standardized soldier received its soul. Master sculptors and their apprentices would take over, working with soft, pliable clay to build the unique elements that defined each figure. The most important of these was, of course, the head. A basic head-shaped core might start from a mold, but it was immediately treated as a blank canvas. Artisans would roll small strips and pellets of clay, carefully applying them to build up the specific topography of a face. An added strip became the bridge of a nose, broad and flat or narrow and prominent. Tiny pellets were shaped into lips, some full and relaxed, others thin and pressed tight with concentration. Ears were attached and detailed, some lying close to the skull, others protruding slightly. Then, with fine tools, the artists would carve the finishing details. They etched the lines of a forehead, the crow's feet at the corners of eyes that had squinted into the sun, the intricate patterns of hair and beard. Hairstyles became a language of their own, from simple top knots to elaborate braids, each strand carefully defined to denote rank and origin. The hands, too, were crafted individually, positioned to hold specific weapons that have long since decayed. The grip of a spear, the draw of a bowstring, the reins of a chariot. This hybrid system explains the physical how, but it deepens the artistic mystery. With so many artisans working simultaneously, how did they maintain such relentless variety? Did the workshop foreman distribute a catalog of facial features, a kind of ancient mix and match guide for sculptors to combine at random? Or were the master artists, perhaps veterans or keen observers of the immense, diverse imperial army, simply granted a directive and a creative license? The instruction may have been as simple as it was profound. Remember every face you have ever seen. Do not repeat a single one. In this space between the mold and the kiln, efficiency gave birth to eternity, and standardization surrendered to the infinite variety of the human face. Yet, this system of named workshops and accountable artisans leads us to a darker corner of the story. For those who built this immortal army may have paid the ultimate price for their unparalleled knowledge. The faces of the Terracotta Army are a question written in clay. To answer it, we must step away from the workshop and into the mind of the man who commanded its creation. Qin Shi Huang was not merely a ruler, he was a revolutionary who forged 7 warring states into a single empire, China. His entire reign was a monumental act of bringing order to chaos, of imposing a unified system on a vast and diverse landscape. This obsession with control did not end at the borders of his kingdom, or even at the end of his life. Ancient Chinese beliefs held that the afterlife was a mirror of the earthly world, a place where one would need the same comforts, authority, and protections. For an emperor who spent his life building and commanding, the thought of entering the next realm powerless and alone was unacceptable. He sought to take his entire world with him, to rule for eternity as he had in life. This is the cultural imperative that breathes purpose into every soldier. The army was not a memorial, it was a functional military garrison for the afterlife, a permanent extension of his imperial power beyond death. The philosophical engine behind this ambition was a school of thought known as legalism. Where other philosophies emphasized virtue or harmony with nature, legalism was ruthlessly practical. It taught that order was maintained through a clear, strict system of laws, rewards, and punishments. The strength of the state was paramount, and every individual had a defined role to play within its machinery. The ideal society, in the legalist view, functioned with the precision of a well-oiled machine, every cog turning in unison for a single purpose. Now look again at the silent ranks in the pits. See the perfect, orderly columns, the clear hierarchy from generals to foot soldiers, the precise arrangement of chariots, cavalry, and archers, each unit in its designated place for maximum tactical effect. This is legalism sculpted into clay. It is the ultimate vision of a controlled, orderly universe frozen in time. This brings us back to the mystery of the faces. Within this rigid, orderly system, why allow for such wild individuality? This may be the most profound insight of all. The unique faces are not a contradiction to legalist philosophy. They are its ultimate expression. Think of it this way: a machine made of identical, anonymous parts is fragile. If one part fails, it is easily replaced, but it holds no inherent value. But an army of individuals, each with a distinct face, a specific skill, and a known place, represents a different kind of strength. It represents totality. By capturing the distinct humanity of his forces, Qin Shi Huang was not celebrating individuality for its own sake. He was cataloging it, claiming it, and organizing it. Every unique face is a cog that has been meticulously documented and assigned its permanent station. The message is one of complete dominion. The emperor's power was so absolute it could encompass the infinite variety of the human experience, name it, rank it, and deploy it in perfect formation for his eternal service. The Terracotta Army, therefore, is far more than a collection of statues. It is a three-dimensional manifesto. It declares that even in death, the emperor's law and order would prevail. It states that every individual, from the lowest soldier to the highest officer, existed to serve the state's singular will forever. This transforms our understanding of the artistic achievement. The craftsmen were not just building soldiers, they were constructing a philosophical ideal, brick by unique brick. The staggering diversity of faces becomes a symbol of total control, a demonstration that nothing, not even the human spirit's infinite variety, could escape the emperor's grand design. This ideological certainty, however, stands in stark contrast to the physical reality of the site we see today. For when the archaeologists first broke into these pits, they found not a pristine, orderly army, but a scene of catastrophic collapse. Modern technology makes perfect copies with the push of a button, but the Qin workshops operated under a different principle entirely. In our age of digital scans and three-dimensional printing, the very idea of creating 8,000 unique objects by hand feels almost radical, a quiet rebellion against the efficiency of sameness. This brings us to a fascinating counterpoint, the sixth mystery, the deliberate absence of true replication. We know they used molds for torsos and legs, a clear step toward mass production. Yet at the most critical point, the moment of giving a soldier its identity, they abandoned the mold and picked up a hand tool. This was a conscious, systemic choice. Why go to all that extra, painstaking effort? Was it simply a practical limitation that they lacked the technology to make intricate face molds? Or was it something far more profound, a philosophical rejection of uniformity itself? Art historians and archaeologists studying the figures suggest a compelling spiritual rationale. In the worldview of the time, an object made for the afterlife was not merely a representation, it was an actual vessel for spiritual essence. A mass-produced, identical face, stamped out again and again, might have been considered spiritually empty, a hollow shell with no power to serve. True spiritual potency required individuality because it required a distinct identity. Each unique face, crafted with intention and variation, was believed to hold a spark of authentic life force. This transforms our understanding of the entire project. The diversity was not an artistic flourish or a logistical compromise, it was a functional requirement. To create an effective, living spiritual army for the emperor's journey into the next realm, the artisans had to build a legion of individuals. They weren't just sculpting clay, they were performing a ritual act of creation, breathing potential life into every figure through the uniqueness of its features. The slight asymmetry of a smile, the particular set of a jaw, the unique wrinkles around the eyes, these weren't accidents or signs of haste. They were the signatures of a soul. Think of it like this: if you were preparing for a perilous journey into the unknown, would you want an escort of anonymous, blank-faced drones, or a company of recognizable individuals, each with their own presence and presumed ability? The Qin answer was emphatic. The army's staggering variety is therefore a feature, not a bug. It is the necessary complexity that makes the spiritual machinery work. This insight reframes the workshop from a factory into a temple of meticulous, sacred craftsmanship. Every decision, from the mix of the clay to the final stroke of a tool on a cheekbone, was in service of building a functional reality in the world beyond. The artisans weren't just following imperial orders, they were navigating a spiritual technology, one where the avoidance of replication was the highest form of respect, both for the gods of the afterlife and for the emperor they were tasked to protect for eternity. Science now holds a mirror up to these ancient faces, revealing secrets the naked eye could never see. Researchers have brought the tools of the 21st century into the pits, using high-resolution, three-dimensional scanning and photogrammetry to create perfect digital twins of hundreds of warriors. They map every contour, every subtle ridge and valley of the clay with sub-millimeter precision. Then they apply sophisticated facial recognition algorithms, the same kind used in modern security systems, to perform an impossible task, comparing these 2,000-year-old visages to find patterns invisible to human observers. The results are a fascinating blend of revelation and mystery. The technology confirms the overwhelming diversity, but it also uncovers a hidden structure within the chaos. The analysis suggests the artisans did not start every single head from a lump of raw clay. Instead, they likely worked from a library of perhaps 10 or so basic face molds. Think of these as foundational templates, like a baker starting with a few standard shapes of dough. These base forms provided a consistent starting point for size and basic proportions. But here is where the artistry explodes. The digital scans show clear evidence of dramatic, hand-applied modification. After removing a basic head from its mold, a sculptor would take fresh clay and build upon it, adding and subtracting material to create a wholly new identity. They might pinch the nose bridge to make it narrower or add a prominent ball of clay to the tip. They could build up the cheekbones with layered strips or carve deep grooves to create a furrowed brow. The ear, often a telltale sign of individual identity, was almost always crafted separately and attached, its unique shape and angle becoming a personal signature. This forensic evidence gives us a clear case study. Look at two warriors standing side by side. Their underlying cranial structure, the distance between the eyes, the width of the jaw, might be nearly identical, suggesting they came from the same base mold. But then, observe the finishing. One has a smooth, youthful forehead, while thick rolls of added clay create a perpetually worried expression on the other. One mouth is a thin, neutral line. The other is shaped with a subtle upward curve at the corners, suggesting the ghost of a smile. The combinations were endless, a system of creative algebra where a few base variables could yield thousands of unique results. This scientific demystification does not diminish the achievement, it refines our awe. It reveals a brilliantly efficient artistic pipeline. The base molds solved for speed and structural integrity, while the hand finishing solved for soul. It tells us the workshop was not a free-for-all of pure imagination, but a highly disciplined atelier where master sculptors, likely following a shared artistic vision or set of directives, performed variations on a theme. The training must have been rigorous, teaching apprentices not just how to sculpt a face, but how to see one, how to understand the architecture of expression and translate it into wet clay. They were not copying live models in the moment. They were pulling from a deep, collective memory of humanity, applying a lexicon of features to create believable, distinct individuals. The science, therefore, brings us closer to the minds of the makers. We see their process, their clever shortcuts, and their unwavering commitment to the final, breathtaking product, a legion where standardization was merely the first whisper in a long, intricate conversation of creation. The silent ranks are a map of an empire. When Qin Shi Huang unified the warring states, he did not just conquer territory, he consolidated people, a vast tapestry of ethnicities and cultures that stretched from the humid river basins of the south to the windy steppes of the north, from the eastern coast to the high western plateaus. This hard-won unity may be the key to understanding the army's most profound feature, its breathtaking diversity of faces. The theory is compelling that these 8,000 warriors are not a random collection of individual expressions, but a deliberate clay census, a three-dimensional demographic record of the empire itself. Look closely at the variations. Some figures possess broad, flat facial structures with high cheekbones, features that anthropologists might associate with populations from the northern plains and grassland regions. Others exhibit narrower faces with more pronounced noses and deeper set eyes, characteristics that could be linked to the peoples of the Western Highlands or Central Valleys. There are youthful, round faces that suggest the softer features often idealized in the eastern coastal states, and older, weathered visages with strong jawlines that speak of a life in the harsh frontier territories. This is not accidental artistry. Historical records from the era confirm that the Qin military machine was a melting pot. Conscription pulled soldiers from every corner of the newly forged empire, from regions that had been distinct kingdoms with their own customs, languages, and yes, common physical traits for generations. The master sculptors in the workshops would have been surrounded by this living mosaic. Their models were not just anonymous soldiers, they were men from Chu, from Yan, from Kai, each carrying the distinct genetic and cultural imprint of their homeland in their very bone structure. By capturing this variety, the Terracotta Army performs a powerful act of political symbolism. It becomes a monument to integration. Each unique face is a brick in the ideological foundation of the new state, visually proclaiming that all these different peoples were now one, under a single heaven, serving a single emperor. This transforms the army from a mere spiritual guard into a piece of state propaganda, a permanent declaration of unity carved in clay. The message is clear: every man from every corner of this vast land has a place in the emperor's grand design, and that place is here in ordered, eternal service. It makes the pits a microcosm of the all-under-heaven ideal, a perfect, frozen snapshot of the empire at the moment of its creation. This layer of meaning adds immense weight to the silent gaze of each warrior. They are not just individuals, they are ambassadors of their entire region, standing shoulder to shoulder with former rivals, now unified in perpetual formation. Their collective presence declares that Qin Shi Huang's greatest conquest was not over land, but over division itself. The pits are not a random scattering of statues, but a masterclass in ancient military science. To understand the full genius of this clay legion, you must see it not as 8,000 individuals, but as a single, perfectly organized machine of war. The layout of the three main pits reveals a tactical mind of the highest order. Pit 1 is the overwhelming force, a rectangular formation the length of several football fields. Here, over 6,000 infantry soldiers stand in 11 parallel corridors, flanked by chariots, ready to advance as a crushing frontal assault. Their formation is not static, it is a moment frozen in time just before the order to march. Pit 2 is the strategic reserve and rapid response wing. Its L-shaped layout contains a complex, combined arms force, with kneeling and standing archers providing covering fire, war chariots positioned for a devastating charge, and units of cavalry ready to outflank an enemy. This pit reveals a sophisticated understanding of battlefield roles and coordination. Then there is Pit 3, the smallest and most intriguing. Shaped like a U, it contains only 68 figures, but these are the elite. High-ranking officers stand in solemn conference, a ceremonial guard stands at attention, and a single, ornate command chariot waits at the center. This is unmistakably the army's headquarters, the brain of the entire operation. The hierarchy is carved into every detail of their appearance. Look at the armor. A low-ranking foot soldier wears simple, rectangular plates laced together with leather cords, practical and easy to produce in mass. But ascend the ranks and the armor transforms. Mid-level officers wear finer scales, with more flexible patterning around the shoulders for greater mobility. The generals, however, are works of art. Their armor is composed of hundreds of tiny, overlapping stone-like plates, meticulously rendered to suggest both immense protection and a status far above the common soldier. Even their postures speak of command, standing taller with a calm, surveying gaze. Hairstyles, too, are a rigid code. Most infantrymen wear their hair in a simple topknot, tied and pulled to the right side of the head. Officers and charioteers, however, sport more elaborate double buns or distinctive caps, clear visual markers of authority that would be instantly recognizable on a chaotic battlefield. This creates a fascinating tension, the core of this ninth mystery. On one hand, you have this flawless, rigid military hierarchy, a system designed to erase personal whim in favor of unified action. On the other, you have the explosion of individual faces, each with its own story etched in clay. This is not a contradiction, it is the point. The philosophy at work here suggests that true power does not come from erasing individuality, but from harnessing it. Every unique person, with their distinct strengths and experiences, has a specific, non-negotiable place within a larger, perfect system. The general's shrewd eyes and the young recruit's determined jaw both serve the same ultimate function. Their personal identity is acknowledged, even immortalized, but it is always subordinate to the order of the ranks. This level of detailed planning across three massive pits, built over decades, prompts a final, logistical wonder. How did the architects and foremen communicate this grand vision? There were no blueprints as we know them. The plan must have lived in the minds of a few master planners, translated through oral instruction, clay models, and marked lines on the earth to thousands of laborers and artists across generations. They were not just building statues, they were materializing a complete theoretical doctrine of war and governance, ensuring that for eternity, every individual face would forever look toward its assigned officer, and every officer would look toward the sealed tomb of the emperor in a chain of command that never, ever breaks. The gray clay we see today is a profound deception. When the first emperor's artisans completed their work, the silent ranks were anything but silent in their appearance. They were a riot of color, a dazzling, lifelike force painted with pigments so vibrant they must have seemed to breathe under the flickering torchlight of the burial chamber. The 10th mystery is not of their creation, but of their original lost glory, a secret that lay hidden in the soil for millennia and vanished in moments upon discovery. Archaeologists working with delicate brushes made the first startling find. As they cleared the compacted earth from a warrior's shoulder, they uncovered not plain terracotta, but a small, brilliant patch of pink, followed by a streak of cinnabar red. Further excavation revealed more fragments of the past, traces of malachite green, azurite blue, and even touches of precious gold. It was a revelation that rewrote the visual imagination of the entire site. These were not the solemn, earthen statues we know, but individually painted soldiers, each one a unique canvas. Their armor was rendered in rich blacks and browns with vivid red laces and ties. Faces were painted in flesh tones with pink lips, black hair, and eyes detailed with white and black to give a startlingly lifelike gaze. The horses were adorned with colorful trappings. The entire necropolis was once a polychrome masterpiece, a mirror of a living, breathing army in full ceremonial and battle regalia. The technology behind this color was both sophisticated and fragile. Artisans first applied a layer of lacquer, a sap-based sealant, directly onto the fired clay as a smooth undercoat. Onto this sticky surface, they painted using mineral-based pigments mixed with binders. The chemistry was a marvel of its time, creating hues meant to last for eternity in the dark, stable environment of the sealed pit, and they did last for over 2,000 years. The tragedy, however, was instantaneous upon their unearthing. Modern air, with its different humidity and temperature, proved catastrophic. The delicate lacquer undercoat, dehydrated by centuries in the dry soil, began to curl and shrink within minutes of exposure. As it contracted, it took the entire layer of exquisite paint with it, causing it to flake off in heartbreaking sheets. In many cases, the vibrant color survived centuries of burial only to disappear before the archaeologist's eyes in a matter of moments. This loss adds a deep layer of poignant tragedy to the mystery. It forces us to completely reimagine the scene. Picture the pits not as a somber, gray crypt, but as a dazzling, subterranean world of color. The long columns of infantry would have been a breathtaking spectacle of contrasting hues, their painted armor gleaming. The faces, already individually sculpted, would have been utterly lifelike with their applied pigmentation, transforming the army from a symbolic guard into a terrifyingly realistic one. The psychological impact on anyone who witnessed the burial, or who might have entered the tomb in antiquity, would have been overwhelming, as if standing before the emperor's actual legions, frozen in time. Today, a quiet, urgent battle is waged in conservation laboratories adjacent to the site. Scientists work to stabilize the few remaining fragments of color using advanced chemical treatments and controlled environments. They study the pigments and lacquer, not just to preserve what is left, but to understand the full, original vision. This ongoing effort is a race against time and decay, a mission to salvage the last echoes of the army's true voice. The loss of the color is a stark reminder that every discovery is also a moment of delicate vulnerability. It challenges us to see beyond the silent, earthen gray, and to visualize the breathtaking chromatic world that once existed, a world where 8,000 unique faces looked out from a sea of dazzling, unforgettable color. The emperor's vision was a flash of lightning in a long night. To truly grasp the staggering singularity of the Terracotta Army, we must see what followed in its wake across the centuries of Chinese history. Later dynasties, most famously the Tang, continued the ancient tradition of furnishing tombs with ceramic guardian figures, but the comparison only deepens the mystery of the Qin achievement. The Tang figurines, often called minki, are beautiful, elegant, and sophisticated. They depict court officials, elegant dancers, sturdy camels from the Silk Road, and foreign grooms. Yet they operate on a completely different artistic principle. While finely crafted, these figures are idealized types, representations of roles rather than individuals. A Tang court lady has a serene, round face, a standardized beauty that repeats across hundreds of tombs. A warrior figurine possesses a fierce, theatrical expression, a symbol of protection rather than a portrait of a specific soldier. They are smaller, often just a foot or two tall, and were produced in workshops for a broader aristocratic class, not solely for an emperor. This shift from the Qin's monumental, hyper-realistic individualism to later, more symbolic representation is one of history's great artistic pivots. So why was the Terracotta Army's formula never repeated, even by emperors of comparable power and wealth? The reasons are a blend of practicality, philosophy, and historical memory. The sheer economic cost of the Qin project was likely ruinous, consuming state resources for decades. Later rulers may have calculated that such an expenditure was simply unsustainable. More profoundly, philosophical beliefs about the afterlife evolved. The Qin legalist focus on replicating the entire earthly military apparatus gave way to other ideas, where symbolic representations were seen as spiritually sufficient. Perhaps the most powerful reason, however, was political. Qin Shi Huang was remembered by subsequent dynasties as a brilliant but harsh unifier, a tyrant whose methods were effective but not to be emulated. His grand tomb complex, with its army of conscripted individuality, became part of his controversial legacy. To replicate it might be to invoke his ghost. Therefore, the Terracotta Army stands not as the start of a tradition, but as a breathtaking anomaly. It represents a moment when artistic ambition, imperial power, and a specific world you align to produce something the world had never seen before and consciously chose not to see again. It is a solitary peak, reminding us that some expressions of human ambition are so complete they can only happen once. The true heart of this entire complex remains untouched, a silent hill under a modern forest of trees. While the Terracotta Army stands guard in its excavated pits, the emperor's own burial chamber, sealed for over 2 millennia, lies undisturbed beneath a massive earthen mound. This is the final, tantalizing frontier, the 12th mystery that looms over everything we have already discovered. Ancient texts, most notably the records of the great historian Sima Qian, written a century after the emperor's passing, describe a chamber of unimaginable splendor. They speak of a miniature universe within, with a ceiling inlaid with pearls to mimic the constellations and a floor carved with a map of the empire, its rivers and seas flowing with shimmering, toxic mercury. The accounts also warn of deadly mechanical crossbows, set to fire automatically at any intruder, a final, lethal defense for eternity. For decades, these descriptions were treated as legend, a fanciful tribute to an emperor's ego. But modern science has begun to whisper that the truth may be stranger than we dared to believe. Non-invasive archaeological surveys, using techniques like ground-penetrating radar and remote sensing, have detected startling anomalies beneath the mound. They reveal a vast, underground palace complex with a regular, geometric layout, and most intriguingly, unusually high concentrations of mercury in the soil. This scientific evidence gives startling credence to Sima Qian's ancient words, suggesting the legends were rooted in a reality almost too grand to comprehend. This presents a profound ethical and technological dilemma for our time. Should we open it, the scientific temptation is immense. The potential for discovery could rewrite history, offering an unprecedented snapshot of Qin Dynasty belief, art, and imperial power. Yet, the risks are just as monumental. Current preservation technology may not be able to protect whatever lies inside from the moment it is exposed to our modern atmosphere. We have already witnessed how the painted warriors lost their colors in minutes. What far greater, irreversible loss might occur within the central chamber? Furthermore, there is a growing respect for the site as a sacred resting place, a cultural sentiment that argues against invasive disturbance. So we wait, using ever more sensitive tools to listen without breaking the seal. This anticipation fuels the greatest speculative question of all. If the outer pits contained an entire army of unique individuals, what lies with the emperor himself? Historians and archaeologists dream of possibilities that make the known army seem like merely the first chapter. Could there be an entire terracotta court buried in adjacent, undiscovered pits? A silent bureaucracy of unique officials, scribes, and advisors frozen in administrative duty. Might there be a retinue of musicians and artisans, or even concubines, each face also crafted with the same breathtaking individuality? The existence of the known army is a promise, a guarantee that the emperor's vision for his afterlife was comprehensive. It tells us he would not have stopped at soldiers, the greatest artistic and historical treasures of the Qin, the ultimate answers to why those 8,000 faces are so unique, may still be buried, waiting in the dark for a future generation with the wisdom and technology to meet them without harm. Every warrior we have already met stands as a sentinel for those unseen wonders, their silent, varied faces a clue that the story is far from over. Their silent gaze is a mirror held up to our own humanity. Standing before the Terracotta Army today, you are not merely observing an ancient artifact. You are participating in a quiet, psychological exchange that spans more than 2,000 years. The experience taps into something profound and unsettling, a phenomenon often described as the uncanny valley. This is the peculiar sense of disquiet we feel when confronted with something that looks almost, but not perfectly, human. A modern robot with a rigid smile might trigger it, or a hyper-realistic wax museum figure. The warriors, with their life-sized forms, realistic posture, and most importantly, their uniquely detailed faces, inhabit this eerie middle ground. They are close enough to real people to trigger our instinct for social recognition, yet their stillness, their uniform gray tone, and their empty eyes remind us they are objects. This tension creates a powerful emotional charge, a blend of fascination and subtle unease that is far more engaging than a simple statue could ever be. That unease, however, quickly blossoms into a deep, empathetic curiosity. Because each face is different, your mind cannot help but try to read them. You find yourself scanning the ranks not as a uniform mass but as a crowd of individuals. You lock eyes with one figure and see the calm resolve of a veteran who has seen countless seasons of service. You turn to another and perceive the anxious determination of a young conscript far from home. The slight parting of lips on a third seems to suggest he is on the verge of speaking, of telling you a story that died with his dynasty. This artistry forces a personal connection. We are wired to seek out faces and stories, and here are 8,000 silent prompts, each one an invitation to imagine a life. We project our own questions, our own sense of memory and loss onto their clay features. In doing so, the vast gulf of centuries collapses. These are not distant historical concepts. They become people, and their world feels suddenly, intimately close. This transformation is the army's ultimate, unintended legacy. Qin Shi Huang commissioned them for a singular, practical purpose, eternal military service in the afterlife. Yet, through the craftsman's dedication to individuality, the figures have transcended that original function entirely. They have evolved from instruments of imperial power into vessels of universal human reflection. They compel us to think about the very nature of identity. In an age of mass production and digital profiles, here is an ancient reminder of the irreducible uniqueness of every person. They also hold a silent dialogue with our own mortality. The emperor sought to conquer death by surrounding himself with an immortal garrison, but what we see today is the poignant opposite, a testament to the fleeting nature of all empires and the enduring mystery of the individual human spirit. The warriors did not preserve his power, but they have immortalized the quiet humanity of his age. We leave the pits not just educated about the Qin Dynasty, but quietly moved. The site becomes less an archaeological dig and more a memorial, not for one emperor, but for the countless unnamed individuals whose faces, by a breathtaking artistic accident, were given a form of eternity. Their silence asks us what of our own world, our own faces, will endure. The clay that holds their faces also holds their fingerprints. This is the 14th mystery, the quiet human cost embedded in every silent soldier. For all its celebration of individuality in form, the creation of the Terracotta Army was an act of staggering collective control. The artistic marvel we admire today rests upon a foundation of immense hardship, a reality that history and archaeology have begun to uncover. While the warriors stand in perfect order, the story of their makers is one of chaos and compulsion. Historical records from the era describe the mobilization of hundreds of thousands of laborers for the emperor's grand projects, his roads, his walls, and his tomb. These were not volunteers, but a mix of conscripted peasants fulfilling their annual duty to the state, convicted criminals serving sentences, and captured artisans from the defeated warring states. They were a workforce assembled by imperial decree, their personal freedoms surrendered to the vision of a single man. Archaeological excavations in the broader mausoleum area have revealed more than just pits of statues. Researchers have uncovered mass burial sites near the tomb complex, containing the remains of countless individuals. Forensic analysis of these bones tells a story written in stress and strain. Skeletons show signs of severe physical trauma, repetitive injuries from hauling massive loads, and evidence of malnutrition and illness. These are not the honored artisans of legend, but people who worked and ultimately perished under conditions of extreme duress. This presents us with a haunting paradox, perhaps the deepest layer of the entire mystery. How do we reconcile the breathtaking celebration of the human face with the systematic suppression of human freedom? How could a project that immortalized individuality in such detail be built on a system that so thoroughly disregarded it? Historians note this as the defining hallmark of Qin Shi Huang's rule, the terrifying ability to marshal human life on a gargantuan scale and expend it for a singular, monumental vision. The emperor's power was so absolute it could command both the exquisite detail of an eyebrow and the brutal labor of the hand that sculpted it. This does not diminish the artistic achievement, but it complicates our understanding of it. It forces us to see the warriors in a dual light. In their faces, we see a tribute to humanity's infinite variety. In their creation, we see the cost of that tribute paid in suffering. The clay itself becomes a poignant archive, the very material that was shaped by calloused, weary hands into expressions of strength and dignity also bears the invisible weight of those hands' exhaustion. This sobering layer adds a necessary depth to our wonder. To fully appreciate the Terracotta Army is to acknowledge this entire spectrum, from the sublime artistry that captures a spark of human spirit to the harsh reality of the system that compelled its capture. It reminds us that history's greatest wonders are rarely born from pure inspiration alone, but often from a complex alloy of genius, will, and profound human cost. And this reflection on the makers leads us to a final, unifying question about the silent army's ultimate purpose, a purpose that may explain both its beauty and its brutality. Each soldier's hand once held a weapon, and that weapon was real. The silent army was not a ceremonial display, but a fully equipped fighting force, a fact driven home by one of the most startling discoveries within the pits. As archaeologists carefully cleared the earth around the collapsed figures, they uncovered not stone or wooden replicas, but thousands of actual bronze weapons, many lying exactly where they had fallen from the warriors' grips over 2 millennia ago. These were not props, they were the finely engineered tools of war that forged an empire, and their preservation is a miracle in itself. Swords over 3 feet long were found, their blades still sharp enough to draw a finger across with care. Spearheads and dagger axes, known as Ji, retained their lethal points. Most remarkably, intricate crossbow triggers, composed of multiple interlocking bronze pieces, were discovered in working condition, a testament to precision engineering on a miniature scale. This arsenal transforms our understanding of the entire complex. The warriors were not just spiritual symbols, they were materially prepared for battle in the next world, armed with the very best technology of their age. The quality of these weapons reveals the secret behind Qin's military dominance: advanced standardization. Just as the warriors' bodies were assembled from modular parts, their weapons were mass-produced to exacting specifications. Swords from different pits held by different soldiers match each other in length, weight, and balance. Crossbow triggers are interchangeable, meaning a piece from one weapon would fit perfectly into another. This was an early industrial revolution applied to warfare, ensuring every soldier in the vast Qin army was equipped with reliable, effective gear. It allowed for rapid repair and resupply on campaign, a logistical advantage that crushed less organized foes. Even more fascinating is the evidence of ancient anti-corrosion technology. Many of the bronze swords and spearheads bear a thin, protective coating that after 2,000 years remains remarkably untarnished. Scientific analysis suggests this is a layer of chromium oxide, a form of early plating that prevented rust. This was a sophisticated metallurgical technique lost for centuries and not rediscovered in the West until the modern era. The Qin artisans were not just making weapons, they were engineering them for eternity, ensuring their lethal functionality would never degrade in the damp darkness of the tomb. This tangible, lethal equipment creates a powerful link between the unique faces and their military roles. The variety of weapons corresponds directly to the different figure types. The kneeling archers in Pit 2 were found surrounded by bronze crossbow triggers and quivers. The infantrymen in the front lines of Pit 1 held the long spears and halberds suited for close-quarters formation fighting. Cavalrymen, with their distinct, shorter tunics, were associated with lighter, curved swords ideal for slashing from horseback. This connection is vital. It means the individuality of the face is not random artistry. It is part of a complete military identity. The young, sharp-featured soldier was an archer. The older, weathered face with a stern jaw belonged to an infantry officer commanding the front line. The unique person and their practical function are fused, one informing the other. This blurs the line between ritual object and practical tool completely. A symbolic army might carry painted wooden swords, but an army armed with real, sharpened, technologically advanced bronze weapons suggests a belief that these items needed to be fully operational. The intention seems to have been that the army would be spiritually and perhaps magically capable of actual combat in the realm beyond. They were not just representing protection, they were embodying it down to the molecular level of their chrome-plated blades. This turns each warrior from a statue into a sentient arsenal, a guardian whose unique face is the command center for a set of very real, very deadly skills, waiting in perfect formation for an order that will never come. Their legacy stretches far beyond the silent pits of Lintong. The unearthing of the Terracotta Army did more than reveal an ancient wonder. It fundamentally shifted the axis of global archaeology and rewrote popular understanding of the ancient world. Before 1974, many global narratives of high civilization were overwhelmingly focused on the Mediterranean, on Egypt, Greece, and Rome. The scale and sophistication of this Chinese discovery arrived like a seismic shock, proving that parallel, monumental achievements were occurring simultaneously on the other side of the planet. It was a powerful, physical correction to a historically narrow viewpoint, forcing textbooks and museums to make room for a new chapter of human ingenuity. This was formally recognized when the mausoleum of the first Qin emperor was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, an acknowledgement that this was not just a Chinese treasure, but a belonging to all humanity. The warriors became ambassadors. Carefully curated exhibitions featuring a handful of the statues began touring the world's great museums, from the British Museum to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. These tours were not just successful, they were cultural phenomena. Millions of people lined up for hours not to see a relic but to stand in the presence of these unique individuals. The public response was a quiet, collective awe, a direct, personal connection to a past that suddenly felt vast and newly interconnected. The central mystery of the 8,000 faces proved irresistibly fertile ground for the global imagination. It fueled countless documentaries seeking to unravel the production secrets, and inspired storylines in films and novels where the clay soldiers might awaken or hold the key to some timeless secret. They became a universal shorthand for ancient mystery and undiscovered history. Perhaps most importantly for the field of archaeology itself, the Terracotta Army set an entirely new benchmark. The Chinese approach to the site, gradually excavating, painstakingly conserving, and constructing an on-site museum that allowed the public to witness archaeology in process, became a model for how to handle a find of such fragile magnitude. It highlighted that discovery is only the first step, and that permanent, sustainable stewardship is the true responsibility. In this way, the army accomplished something its creators could never have foreseen. It became a bridge. It connected east and west through shared wonder. It connected the past to the present through ongoing science, and it connected individual curiosity to our collective heritage. The silent, unique faces challenged us to look deeper, not only into their own history, but into the broader, richer tapestry of human achievement, reminding us that great stories are still waiting beneath the earth in every corner of the world. The most detailed account of this monumental project comes from a voice separated from the events by a full century. Sima Qian, the grand historian of the Han Dynasty, compiled his masterwork, the Shiji, or Records of the Grand Historian, drawing on archives and oral histories that survived the Qin Dynasty's fall. His description of the first emperor's tomb is brief, vivid, and utterly tantalizing. He writes of a subterranean palace where the heavens were depicted on the ceiling with pearls, and the earth was modeled on the floor with flowing mercury. He mentions the conscription of over 700,000 laborers and, most famously, warns of mechanically triggered crossbows set to fire at any intruder. Yet, for all this evocative detail, Sima Qian says nothing explicit about the army of clay soldiers. There is no mention of pits of 8,000 figures, and certainly no note about their stunningly unique faces. This silence is a historical mystery in its own right. For a project that must have consumed decades and countless lives, how could such a central feature go unrecorded by the era's greatest historian? One possibility is that the army's existence was simply common knowledge, an obvious part of the tomb's furnishings that didn't require special mention, much like we wouldn't describe every piece of furniture in a palace. Perhaps Sima Qian, focusing on the emperor's character and the tomb's most fantastical elements, saw the clay gods as a logistical footnote. The other, more intriguing possibility is that the army was a state secret of the highest order. Qin Shi Huang was paranoid about his safety in life and his rest in death. The location and full contents of his tomb were meant to be forever hidden. The laborers who built it were, according to legend, sealed inside. If the existence of this vast ceramic legion was successfully suppressed, it could explain why Sima Qian, writing 100 years later from fragmentary sources, might have missed it entirely or heard only vague whispers. This gap in the written record fundamentally changes how we understand the site. It means archaeologists are not simply verifying a historical text, they are reading a primary document written in clay and soil. Every tool mark on a warrior's cheek, every fingerprint in the armor, every variation in hairstyle becomes a sentence in a story the written histories forgot to tell. The silence of Sima Qian elevates the material evidence from mere illustration to essential testimony. It forces us to listen to the artifacts themselves, to decode a language of craftsmanship and intent that speaks louder than any surviving scroll. This reliance on physical clues makes the individuality of each face not just an artistic wonder, but a critical piece of historical data, a direct message from the workshop floor about the values and vision of a vanished empire. The shattered reality of the pits tells another story entirely. When archaeologists first broke through the ancient soil, they did not find an army standing in perfect, silent formation. They found a scene of catastrophic collapse, a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle of staggering complexity. Thousands of warriors lay in fragments, their bodies smashed by the weight of the ceiling that had fallen in centuries before, their colors flaking away upon contact with the modern air. This presented a monumental new challenge, one that continues to this day, the 18th mystery of restoration and modern interpretation. Inside the on-site conservation laboratories, a quiet, meticulous drama unfolds. Teams of specialists work in what can only be described as the world's largest and most fragile puzzle room. Before them are trays filled with countless terracotta fragments, each one a piece of a unique human form. The task is one of extreme patience and deductive reasoning. Conservators must first clean each fragment, then begin the slow process of matching edges, searching for the subtle clues of a curve that becomes a shoulder, a line that flows into a jaw. They use traditional methods alongside modern technology, employing three-dimensional scanning to virtually test fits before any physical glue is applied. The goal is not just to reassemble a statue, but to reconstruct a historical individual from a pile of broken clay. This painstaking work has become its own form of archaeology, revealing secrets the intact figures could never show. As conservators fit pieces together, they uncover the ancient craftsman's own repair marks, places where the Qin-era artisans patched cracks or reattached limbs before the initial burial, evidence that quality control was a concern even then. They find the subtle glue points and assembly seams, mapping the exact modular construction of each figure in a way surface observation never could. Each reconstruction is a dialogue between the modern restorer and the ancient maker, separated by millennia but united by the shared problem of holding the figure together. This process has sparked a profound ethical debate within the heritage community. Should every single broken warrior be restored to its original, upright glory? Or should some sections be left exactly as they were found, a preserved snapshot of the moment of discovery, with fragments lying in the soil as a testament to both ancient violence and modern revelation? There are strong arguments for both approaches. Full restoration allows the public to witness the army's intended, awe-inspiring scale and artistic detail, fulfilling the emotional and educational purpose of the site. It honors the original artistic vision, leaving some areas unrestored, however, preserves the authentic archaeology of the collapse, a raw and powerful record of the passage of time and the tangible reality of the find. It tells the truer story of what the archaeologists actually saw, a narrative of ruin and recovery. This debate touches on a core question of how we engage with history. Are we curators of objects or interpreters of stories? Each glued joint on a terracotta warrior is a modern decision, an interpretation of how the past should look in the present. When a restorer chooses which fragment goes where, they are making a statement about continuity, about healing a break in time. The restored soldier before us is therefore a hybrid, an ancient artifact filtered through contemporary skill, ethics, and perspective. It stands not just as a Qin Dynasty creation, but as a 21st century one as well. This ongoing project, with its debates and delicate brushes, ensures the army is not a static relic, but a living conversation. It reminds us that preservation is not about stopping time, but about carefully, respectfully choosing how to bridge it. A clenched fist, an open palm curled into a circle, a careful space between thumb and forefinger. Look beyond the faces of the Terracotta Army, and you will notice another layer of silent language in the positioning of every single hand. These warriors were found with their weapons scattered around them, but the weapons were not molded as part of their grip. They were separate, real bronze objects placed into hands sculpted to receive them. This design choice, this 19th mystery of the empty hands, is a profound clue to the pragmatic spirituality of the entire project. On one level, it is a masterstroke of practical craftsmanship. Firing a life-sized clay figure in a wood kiln was a perilous operation. Thin, delicate appendages like fingers were incredibly vulnerable to heat, stress, and cracking. By sculpting the hands in a general gripping posture, but leaving the actual weapon to be inserted later, the artisans solved a major technical problem. They created a robust, hollow form that could survive the kiln's intense heat, ensuring the warrior's body remained intact. The real, lethal weapon could then be secured in place with cords or adhesives after the firing, a final step in the assembly process. Yet, to see this only as a firing technique misses the deeper symbolic resonance. In the Qin worldview, the separation of the man from his tool may have held ritual significance. The warrior and his weapon were two distinct entities, each requiring its own form of consecration. The clay body was given a spirit through its unique face and painted details. The bronze sword or spear was given power through its metallurgical perfection and lethal function. Bringing them together at the time of burial completed the circuit, fusing the spiritual guardian with his physically potent armament. It transformed the statue from a representation into a functional entity. This speaks to a mindset where the boundary between the ritual and the practical was fluid. Every element had to be real enough to work in the next world. A sword molded as one with a clay hand would be a fake, a single inert object, but a separately forged bronze blade, placed into a hand crafted to wield it, created a partnership, an active readiness. The empty hand, therefore, is a gesture of eternal expectation. It is permanently poised to receive the means of fulfilling its duty. It symbolizes a state of perpetual preparedness, a vow that these guardians would never be caught unarmed because their tools were as real and present as they were. This duality is the essence of the Qin approach. Nothing was merely symbolic, everything was operational. A facial expression conveyed character and origin, a hairstyle denoted rank, a hand's curl anticipated a specific weapon, and that weapon was engineered to last forever. The empty hands remind us that for the people who built this army, the afterlife was not a vague paradise, but a territory that required logistical planning, functional equipment, and sentries whose readiness was engineered into the very curl of their clay fingers. Across the ancient world, rulers sought to immortalize their military might in stone and paint, yet none chose the path of the first emperor. To grasp the full strangeness of the Terracotta Army, we must glance at the other great martial portraits of antiquity. In the vast stone reliefs of the Assyrian Empire, we see armies depicted as relentless, repetitive waves of power. The soldiers are carved in profile, marching in lockstep, their faces and armor nearly identical. The message is one of overwhelming, impersonal force, a machine where the individual is subsumed entirely by the collective motion. Similarly, in classical Greek art, the hoplite soldier is an ideal. Vase paintings and sculptures show the perfect, athletic form, a symbol of civic virtue and harmonious proportion. The Greek focus was on the archetype, the embodiment of the citizen soldier, not the particular man who bore the shield. These approaches make profound cultural sense. They celebrate order, ideal beauty, or the abstract concept of the state. The Qin choice stands in stark, deliberate contrast. It rejects both the anonymous Assyrian wave and the idealized Greek form. Instead, it pursues a third, far more demanding possibility, a breathtaking fusion of colossal scale and intimate, hyper-realistic detail. The Qin artisans created an army that is both a monumental collective and a gathering of irreplaceable individuals. This unique fusion points to a distinct philosophical priority buried deep within the legalist statecraft of the era. For Qin Shi Huang, the strength of the collective was everything, but that collective could not be abstract. It had to be tangible, mustered, and catalogued. Its power derived not from erasing the individual, but from acknowledging, organizing, and ultimately claiming every single one. Each unique face is a registered asset in the empire's eternal ledger. This comparative view lifts the Terracotta Army from a national treasure to a global historical anomaly. It reveals a moment where artistic expression and political ideology merge to solve a problem no other civilization seems to have posed in quite the same way. How do you represent total power? The Assyrians answered with terrifying uniformity. The Greeks answered with perfect form. The Qin answered with a paradox, a census in clay, proving that true dominion lies in seeing the multitude not as a mass, but as 8,000 separate promises of loyalty, forever frozen at attention. That same tension between the mass and the individual now echoes in our digital world. The Terracotta Army's aesthetic and conceptual power has traveled far beyond archaeology, becoming a profound reference point for modern artists, designers, and thinkers. Its silent ranks speak directly to contemporary dilemmas about identity, creation, and scale in an age of technology. For visual artists, the army is a powerful muse. Sculptors like Antony Gormley, known for his vast installations of identical cast iron figures, engage in a direct dialogue with the Qin legacy, exploring what happens to the human form when it is replicated en masse. Other creators are drawn to the paradox of the unique face emerging from a system, using modern materials to explore the same themes of anonymity and individuality that the ancient artisans mastered. In film and visual effects, the army's influence is both practical and philosophical. The challenge of digitally rendering vast, believable crowds for epic cinema is a direct descendant of the Qin workshop's problem. How do you create a multitude that feels alive and authentic, not a copy-pasted sea of clones? Advanced crowd simulation software now uses algorithms to inject variation into digital characters, altering their gait, their posture, and crucially, their facial features. The goal is to achieve what the Qin sculptors did by hand, to avoid the uncanny valley of repetition and create a convincing, diverse multitude. This connects to one of the most relevant conversations of our time: artificial intelligence and facial generation. Modern AI systems can now create photorealistic images of human faces that do not exist, each one unique. This technological marvel forces us to revisit the ancient mystery with new urgency. The Qin workshop, in its way, was an early factory for generating unique identities, guided by human observation and memory. Today's algorithms perform a similar feat, but guided by data patterns and mathematical models. Both endeavors grapple with the same core question: what does it mean to create a face, and where does its authenticity reside? Is a face crafted by an artisan who may have been remembering a real soldier more authentic than one generated by a neural network trained on millions of photographs? The Terracotta Army, therefore, becomes a timeless benchmark. It stands at the very beginning of a long human conversation about the relationship between standardization and the self. In design, its principles influence everything from architecture, where repeating modular units create unique living spaces, to product design, where mass customization allows for personal expression within a manufactured framework. The army teaches that uniformity and individuality are not opposites, but can be woven together to create something far more powerful than either alone. It reminds every modern creator that within any system, no matter how large or efficient, there is always room for the human detail, the slight imperfection, the unique signature that transforms an object into a subject. In this way, those 8,000 ancient faces continue to guide us, offering a clay-born wisdom for navigating our own age of digital replication and the endless search for genuine identity. Their survival is a quiet defiance of time's usual hunger. For more than 2,200 years, this clay legion endured not on a pedestal in a temple, but buried in the dark, forgotten earth. The very forces that seemed to destroy it, the crushing weight of collapsing ceilings and the relentless pressure of soil, became the unlikely guardians of its secrets. This environmental mystery is as vital as any artistic one, for without the unique geology and history of this specific site, we would have only dust and legend instead of 8,000 faces. The first layer of protection was the depth and obscurity of the pits themselves. They were not shallow graves, but carefully engineered underground chambers, roofed with heavy wooden beams and mats, then buried under many meters of packed earth. This deep burial placed them below the active zone of frost, roots, and most surface disturbances. Crucially, while the Grand Tomb Mound was a famous landmark mentioned in histories, the precise locations of the army pits were lost. They escaped the attention of grave robbers who plundered so many other imperial tombs across China, leaving the silent ranks undisturbed in their dark slumber. Then came the collapse. Over centuries, the wooden roof supports rotted and gave way. The tremendous weight of the overlying soil crashed down, shattering the warriors into fragments. From a modern perspective, this seems like a catastrophe, but from an archaeological standpoint, this collapse was a paradoxical act of preservation. The rubble created a stable, protective matrix. It pinned the fragments in place, preventing them from being scattered by water flow or later human activity. It sealed the figures in a compact, dry environment, shielding the delicate surface details and any surviving paint from further erosion. The soil itself, a fine, wind-blown sediment known as loess, was a key player. This particular loess is slightly alkaline and remarkably stable when dry. It acted like a soft, consistent blanket, maintaining a steady microclimate around the artifacts. Its chemistry was gentle on the bronze, helping to slow corrosion, and it cradled the fragile lacquer and paint layers on the warriors, allowing minute traces to survive where they were pressed directly against the earth. Even the local water table played a subtle role. The pits were deep, but not so deep that they were perpetually waterlogged, which would have dissolved the clay into sludge. Instead, they existed in a zone of balanced dryness, where moisture was present but not destructive, further stabilizing the environment. This perfect, accidental convergence of factors created a natural time capsule of extraordinary fidelity. Compare this to so many other wonders of the ancient world, exposed to air, looted for materials, or repurposed by later cultures. The Parthenon marbles were weathered by centuries of open air. The Library of Alexandria was consumed by fire. The Terracotta Army, by contrast, was granted a 2-millennium-long period of rest in a dark, quiet, and chemically gentle womb of earth. Its violent shattering was, in a profound irony, what kept its pieces safe and in context for us to find. When the Farmers' Well broke through in 1974, they didn't just discover an army, they cracked open a geological vault that had been sealed since the collapse of the Qin Dynasty itself. Every fracture line on a warrior's torso, every pile of terracotta rubble, is a page in an environmental history book telling the story of slow decay and miraculous preservation. This is why we have such detailed evidence to study today. The tool marks, the fingerprints, the traces of color. The earth did not just hide the army, It faithfully held it, waiting for a time when we could begin to piece together not just the statues but the very conditions that saved them for our eyes. Silence was never the point of this subterranean world. Step beyond the visual spectacle of the clay faces and consider the space they were built to inhabit, a vast, enclosed chamber roofed with timber and buried under the weight of the earth. The original sensory experience, now lost to collapse, was a carefully engineered part of the army's power. The acoustics of such a space would have been profound. If you were to stand in the center of Pit 1 when its wooden ceiling was intact, a single spoken word or the strike of a ceremonial bell would not simply fade. It would reverberate, bouncing off the long, parallel walls of packed earth and the serried ranks of thousands of clay forms, creating a low, lingering rumble that felt less like sound and more like a physical presence. This was not an accidental byproduct of construction, but a likely feature of the design. Imagine a ritual conducted in that space before it was sealed. Chants by priests or the deep, resonant tones of bronze instruments would not be swallowed by silence, but multiplied and amplified by the architecture itself. The sound would seem to come from everywhere at once, from the very soldiers standing in the dark, as if the army itself was humming with a collective spirit. This transforms the pits from a static display into an immersive, auditory environment. The intended atmosphere was likely one of overwhelming awe, a feeling engineered to humble any living visitor during the burial rites and, by belief, to daunt any spiritual intruder in the afterlife. The precise military formations amplify this psychological effect exponentially. You are not looking at a line of statues, you are surrounded by them. The spatial arrangement in Pit 1, with its 11 deep corridors, creates a feeling of being enveloped, observed from all sides by an infinite, disciplined host. There is no single focal point, no safe edge to your perception. Your gaze is funneled down endless columns that disappear into the gloom, making the army feel even larger than its staggering numbers. This architectural psychology is deliberate. It is the built form of the emperor's authority, a spatial expression of total control. The design serves to diminish the individual observer, to make any entity, human or spiritual, feel insignificant before the monolithic, ordered will of the state. The function was not just to guard but to intimidate. To enter this space was to be subjected to a silent, sensory assault. The sheer scale pressing in from all sides, the potential for eerie echoes suggesting unseen activity, the weight of 8,000 unique gazes fixed in your direction. This adds a crucial, often overlooked layer to the emperor's grand design for eternity. His eternal security was not entrusted to walls alone, but to an environment meticulously crafted to disorient and overwhelm. The terracotta warriors were not just sentinels, they were the key component in a terrifying psychological machine, a monument built not only to be seen, but to be felt in the very bones of anyone who dared approach. This realization asks us to listen more closely to the empty pits, to hear in their quiet not an absence, but the faded echo of a calculated, monumental dread. The army has a general, but its emperor is nowhere to be seen. Among the thousands of unique faces, from the lowliest infantryman to the highest-ranking officer in the command pit, one visage is deliberately, powerfully absent. Qin Shi Huang himself is not sculpted in terracotta. He does not stand at the head of his columns or ride in the lead chariot. This missing central figure is the silent heart of the entire complex, a void that speaks louder than any statue. His presence is not rendered in clay because, in the worldview that built this place, it did not need to be. His authority was the air the army breathed, the invisible force that arranged every soldier into perfect, eternal formation. To have placed a likeness of the emperor among the troops would have been a profound philosophical error. In the rigid hierarchy of Qin legalist thought, the sovereign was not a peer, not even the first among equals. He was the singular sun around which the entire state orbited. He was the source, not a participant. The army, in all its breathtaking individuality, was an emanation of his will, a tool extended from his hand, not a retinue for his company. This deliberate omission transforms our understanding of the site's spiritual mechanics. The warriors were not built to accompany him, but to await him. Their silent, watchful faces are all turned inward, oriented toward the sealed central mound where his physical body rests. They exist in a state of perpetual expectation, guarding the approach to the one entity whose presence completes their purpose. This makes the Emperor's spiritual power not diminished by his absence but magnified. He is the unspoken command in every ear, the unseen gaze felt on every back. His influence is pervasive precisely because it is not represented, it is assumed, it is absolute. The entire necropolis becomes a monument to this idea of singular sovereignty. The thousands of unique individuals with their distinct faces and roles demonstrate the Emperor's power to organize complexity, but his own missing likeness demonstrates a power beyond that, the power to transcend representation entirely. He is the void at the center of the whirlwind, the silent space from which all this intricate order flows. This leads to a poignant reflection on the nature of legacy. Qin Shi Huang sought to conquer death by building an eternal empire in microcosm. He populated his afterlife with a mirror of his military, but he himself remained uniquely, defiantly human, relying on his mortal remains as the final, sacred anchor for all this constructed eternity. The clay army can stand forever, but it waits for a king who will never come to review the troops, making their vigil both a triumph of imperial will and a profoundly human tragedy. That missing face at the center of it all may be the very reason we cannot look away. The Terracotta Army does not simply present a solved historical fact. It offers an open question, a grand puzzle box with 8,000 intricate pieces. Its enduring power lies in this perfect storm of scale and intimacy, a mystery that refuses to be fully solved, inviting every new generation to bring its own curiosity to the silent ranks. Why does this particular enigma hold such a persistent grip on our imagination? Perhaps because it uniquely combines so many different fields of human inquiry into a single, breathtaking scene. It is a masterpiece of art history, a frozen lesson in military science, a demographic snapshot of anthropology, and a groundbreaking feat of ancient materials engineering, all woven together. The central question of the faces acts like a key that can unlock any of these doors, and we are compelled to try them all. For modern researchers, the mystery is not a single riddle but a layered network of them, each with its own tantalizing loose end. For some, the sleepless nights are driven by the dream of a definitive catalogue. Could we ever document and digitally map every single one of the 8,000 faces, creating a complete archive of this ancient population? What subtle patterns of feature grouping, what geographic signatures, might emerge only when we can see the entire gallery at once? For others, the obsession is logistical. They walk the pits and see not statues but the ghost of an unimaginable supply chain. They lie awake reconstructing the workshop schedules, the clay supply routes, the kiln temperatures, and the daily quotas needed to sustain such a project for decades. How did the foreman avoid duplication? Was there a master wall of sketches, a system of tokens, or simply a shared cultural memory so vast it could guide 10,000 hands? Then there are those drawn to the possibility of a hidden language. Could the variations in features, the specific arch of an eyebrow, the set of a lip be more than artistic license? Could they contain a subtle code denoting birthplace, clan, or even specific achievements in the emperor's service? Is each face not just a portrait but a resume etched in clay? This army, therefore, transcends its original purpose. It has become a perpetual invitation. It is a neutral, patient witness that allows us to project our own era's tools and questions onto its surface. The archaeologists of the 1970s brought shovels and brushes. Today's researchers bring laser scanners and artificial intelligence algorithms. Tomorrow's scholars may bring technologies we cannot yet conceive, all aimed at listening to the same silent stories. This is the secret of its timeless allure. The first emperor sought to create a monument to finality, a closed system guarding a sealed tomb. Instead, he accidentally created one of history's most open-ended conversations. The mystery of the faces ensures the army is never truly finished, never fully understood. It remains a collaborative project across centuries, where each new insight feels less like a conclusion and more like a thoughtful reply to a question asked 2,200 years ago. Every silent warrior stands on a threshold. Beyond the questions of clay and craftsmanship lies the final, most profound layer of the mystery, the spiritual intention that breathes purpose into the entire necropolis. To understand the army, we must see it not as a collection of statues, but as a bridge, a meticulously engineered conduit between the emperor's earthly reign and his eternal one. In the ancient Chinese worldview, death was not an end, but a transition to a parallel existence that mirrored life in its needs and hierarchies. A person was thought to possess multiple souls, including a Hun spirit, which was associated with consciousness and could travel after death. For an emperor, ensuring the continuity of his power required more than treasure. It required a functioning court, a loyal bureaucracy, and above all, a loyal military. This is where the unique faces shift from artistic marvel to spiritual technology. The prevailing theory among historians is that these individualized vessels were created to house or attract the Hun spirits of the emperor's actual soldiers. A generic, mass-produced face might be an empty shell, but a face crafted with distinct, lifelike features provided a recognizable home, a specific anchor point for a spirit to inhabit in the afterlife. Each warrior, therefore, was a potential residence, a clay body awaiting its spiritual tenant to report for eternal duty. This transforms the pits from a museum display into a barracks for the unseen. The army's state of eternal readiness takes on a deeper meaning. They are not posed for a parade, but frozen in the moment before action, because their function was perpetual service. Their hands are shaped to hold real weapons because those weapons might need to be used. They face outward in defensive formations because the threats in the spirit world were considered just as real as those in the physical one. The emperor was not building a monument, he was mobilizing a permanent garrison for a new frontier. This idea of a complete microcosm is staggering in its ambition. The army is just one department of this projected afterlife administration. While the central tomb remains sealed, the implication of the warrior's existence suggests a full shadow empire buried in the surrounding earth, a terracotta bureaucracy ready to administer, musicians ready to perform, servants ready to attend. The unique faces of the soldiers become the blueprint for this entire endeavor, proving that the emperor's vision demanded not symbols but simulated, operational individuals. This synthesis lifts the mystery from the technical to the theological. It asks us to grapple with an ancient desire so powerful it could move mountains of earth and command the labor of generations, the desire to conquer death through will, artistry, and overwhelming preparation. The 8,000 faces are not merely portraits, they are 8,000 arguments against oblivion. 8,000 clay promises that nothing, not even the final journey, would diminish the emperor's command. In this light, the artistic achievement becomes a spiritual one. The craftsmen were not just sculptors, they were architects of eternity, building a bridge of clay and belief strong enough for an emperor to cross, followed by the silent, unique spirits of his entire world. The silent clay of Lintong holds a final, humbling truth. Our journey through the workshops and philosophies, the pigments and the pits, does not end with a simple answer neatly wrapped. Instead, the Terracotta Army stands before us not as a mystery solved, but as a mystery deepened. It is a testament written in earth and fire, a monument to the sheer scale of human ambition, the breathtaking reach of artistry, and the profound, universal quest to leave a mark that outlasts a single lifetime. We have moved from the shock of a farmer's shovel to the quiet hum of a modern laboratory, from the brutal realities of imperial labor to the intricate spiritual beliefs that gave this project its soul. Each layer we peeled back revealed another question, another nuance, another quiet story waiting in the fragments. Those 8,000 unique faces are the heart of it all. They remind us with silent insistence that history is not a monolith. It is not a single grand narrative carved in stone. It is a collection of countless individual stories, most of which have been lost forever to the erosion of time. Here, in this one place, through a confluence of artistic genius and imperial will, a precious fraction of those stories was captured. They do not shout. They whisper from the curve of a smile, the set of a jaw, the slight asymmetry of an ear attached by a careful hand 2 millennia ago. This silent chorus is a call to us here in the present. It is a call to preserve our fragile, shared heritage, to approach the past not as a closed book but as an open conversation. It urges us to keep looking, to keep wondering, to keep questioning the silent sentinels of history, whether they are made of clay, stone, or parchment. For in that curiosity, we honor not just emperors and empires, but the quiet humanity of every individual whose story is woven into our collective past. If this journey into the heart of an ancient enigma has stirred your own curiosity, consider joining us for more explorations into history's greatest puzzles. We would love to hear your thoughts too. Look across those ranks of silent faces and tell us which warrior's untold story would you most want to hear.